Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Global Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Kel Quinn, and joining me today is a good friend of mine, Doogie Quinn from Ultimate Football TV. How's it going, Doogie?
That's not too bad. It's good to be on. Interested to be on the United one.
Yeah, it's not often that you exclusively talk about Man United, but there's always a first for everything. Okay, the first order of business is the Aston Villa game, obviously from a few days ago, which once again was a very abject performance from Man United. It just seems to be every single game now is a pretty woeful performance. It's either a deserved loss or a lucky win or draw. And on this occasion, it was a lucky win. So, what was your thoughts on the game then, Dougie?
Hey, the first half was fantastic. It was end to end. And as a United fan, you could have even enjoyed that and been happy with that. It was a bit more free flowing. But the second half was just, it wasn't great. It wasn't great. Aston Villa controlled large periods the second half, and every time they attacked, you sort of thought there could have been a chance of a goal coming. Obviously, they had the goals disallowed, and it's all unlucky on their part, but at the same time, that's what VAR is there for. And rightly or wrongfully, whichever way you want to look at it, the goals were disallowed. One of them, of course, is a definite disallowed goal for offside, but the other one, I think there's a bit more debate about and a bit more confusion or argument over. But I think all in all, United won the game, but it wasn't great. It really wasn't great, and it doesn't make you filled full of confidence for almost like the reverse fixture coming up in the Premier League. If United play like that away from home, I think Aston Villa will win. Aston Villa, if they play like that, they will win. But when it's at their pitch, it's going to be different. And United may not get the luck on their side, or just sort of the rub of the green, or De Gea may not pull off some of the saves he usually does. And it's going to be a tough one coming up the weekend. But all in all, the FA Cup tie, I would be disappointed. But obviously, you're going to be happy to be going through to the next round. But I think the performance overall, it's nothing to write home about.
Yeah, it was pretty poor. We were too open again. Midfield looks weak. The fullbacks are not good defensively. Varane, probably our best player on the night, probably prevented us from conceding a few times as well. Lindelof was pretty woeful. You could use the excuse that he'd been out with coronavirus for a while, but we've seen him being turned like that, in normal times. The way he was turned by Ollie Watkins, and got nowhere. Watkins hit the crossbar. No defender at that level should be turned that easily. Come back to the refereeing decision. I think one of the gripes about it was probably the fact that he took 3.5 minutes, to come to that conclusion. I think also the problem is with the decision is that we've seen that quite a lot. Players being blocked in the penalty area and nothing's given. But on this occasion, I think the reason why it was ruled out is because is it Jacob Ramsey? I think he was offside before and when he made the block on Cavani, and that's why he ruled it out. So, what did you think of that decision?
It was not, as you say, it took so long to come to an overall decision on it. And I think that's what makes it more annoying, especially when you're the side that it ends up going against. Like, I'm sure Aston Villa fans pulling their hair out whenever that decision was finally made. It seemed like one of them situations where they were continually looking at the offside for whether or not, I think it was Watkins had flicked it on before Ings had put it in. They kept looking at that. It was at so many different angles, and they'd done that for the guts of 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes. And then suddenly, whenever they realised that there maybe wasn't contact there, they don't know what to do there, they went and started looking at the Cavani and Ramsey incident. It's a bit strange that, because I know, from instance, before in certain VAR incidents, they've said that there's one particular incident that they look at, and that's it. They don't then switch to look at another incident, which is essentially what they've done. I know we're still looking at an overall offside, but they switched the point of view that they were looking at, which before has been a reason why they didn't give decisions, was they said, well, we're looking at one specific area or one specific incident and not another, and that's why a decision wasn't given. So it's peculiar. In my opinion, I think Cavani bought it. Of course he did. There wasn't a lot in it, but it was cute from him. He knew what he was doing. He thought that he could have a quick free out, and he got it in the end. And he was lucky enough, I suppose, because Ramsey was offside and it was interfering with play. But again, then you look at the side of it, would Cavani have gotten to the ball? That's just ifs and buts, though, So it's a tricky one. I can understand Villa's point of view to it, but I can also understand why United fans, or even just the United team as a whole, would agree with the decision.
Yeah, I think it was a case of they were obviously forensically looking to see was there an offside when from the cross coming in. Then maybe one of the other officials in the VAR room noticed that there was a player being blocked on the edge of the box as well. And then once it forensically come to the decision that there was no offside from when the ball was put in the net, that they told the on-field referee Michael Oliver then to go over to the screen because they'd obviously they'd spotted, maybe they had spotted it while they were looking at something else, if you know what I mean. Yeah. So
Yeah.
okay. Um, there's been a few takeaways from that game, obviously, from United point of view. And one of the major talking points was being Marcus Rashford. His form has been pretty abysmal since he came back from injury. I know he got a few goals initially when he came back, but he's been in a major slump now for at least 8 weeks. The crowd went berserk at him in both halves. When he wasn't challenging for loose balls. I mean, the one in the second half, which I remember vividly, is where Mason Greenwood's shot is parried by Martinez and Rashford doesn't even challenge for the rebound. So there's been some discussion. Obviously, the abuse has been over the top, and the criticism. Some people saying he's just an average player. I wouldn't really sit on that fence. I would say he's a good player that's just not in form at the moment. I would like to see him being taken out of the firing line. It might be a good idea just to send him away for a few weeks because other managers at United in the past used to do that. Ferguson, if someone even like Peter Schmeichel, for example, when he wasn't going through a good spell, he would send him on holiday for a few weeks, and hopefully he would come back and be refreshed and ready to go again. Rashford being dropped for one game isn't good enough. He probably just needs to be taken out of the firing line for a few weeks, and then hopefully he can get his head together and back to form again. I just don't think persisting with putting him in the team in most games isn't going to turn it around at this point. That's already been tried and it's failed.
Yeah, when you come to define type player Rashford is, we say he's a good player. I agree, he is a good player and he has the potential to be an even better player. He's still young. I think people forget that he is still a young player as well. And there's been a lot of spotlight on the guy for about the last 12 months or so, if not more. So there's going to be a lot of that's going to be resting on his shoulders, a lot of responsibility and things such as that. And maybe there's a slight problem with the hunger there. Maybe it's not the same as what it was. Like I say, he did break on the same very young age, and a lot of expectancy at a young age as well. So taking him out of the firing line could be a very, very sensible thing to do. It would help him get his hunger back. It's not as if he's being off on an injury list or anything like that. If he's just took out of the firing line in the respect of where he gets a break and he gets to just realize, basically regain that hunger to want to be in the team, because like you said, that incident in the match where he didn't even move, he didn't budge, he didn't go to pounce on a ball, which, to be fair, about 2 seasons ago, he would have smashed in the back of the net. He would have been the first two, no problem. So maybe there is an issue there. So a break could do him a world of good, and he could come back firing on all cylinders, which is what all United fans want, obviously, because we think about, you think about Man United, Rashford and Greenwood have the potential to be two absolutely fantastic players. And if United can get both of them inspiring in the same squad, like that would be sensational for Man United. It really, really would. So the importance is obviously to treat Rashford the right way. I think continually playing him is wrong. I don't like when players are out of form or not. It's not clicking for them. They're not playing. I think persisting with playing them does not solve the problem. I know there's others that disagree and say you keep playing until it works, but for me that doesn't work. I think you need to take time out. Maybe switch things up a bit, change it about, and then that player can come back in whenever things are maybe going a bit smoother, a bit better, and they can just ease themselves straight back into the fold.
Yeah, I think so. I think he should be taken out of the firing line. He's just not going to play his way back into form. The way things are going. Yeah, I don't think he's on the same level as Mbappe. I don't think anybody who's sensible does, but he's certainly a much better player than what he's producing at the moment. So it'll be interesting to see how it develops. So anyone joining us, please make sure to give us a wee thumbs up in the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below. Okay, moving on to McTominay, who had another pretty good game, scoring the winning goal as he did against Burnley. But the problem has been the kind of inconsistency with him. The game in between Burnley and the Villa Cup game was the loss at home to Wolves, which he was pretty poor in. Is it a case of he plays well against the kind of lesser teams, or teams that kind of more open, probably more specifically, because he excelled against Leeds. I think he scored in a game against Leeds last season. He scored twice in the first 3 minutes. So when teams are wide open, he seems to excel as a midfielder. He loves to get forward and shoot from the edge of the box. But when teams are getting numbers behind the ball, like Wolves do, he's not the type of player that can play, a real creative pass and play somebody in. He's not that type of player. So is it just a case of he excels in certain situations, or is he just a very kind of limited player who's inconsistent?
I think it's almost harsh, almost slightly too harsh to say he's a limited sort of player, limited ability player, or anything like that. I think that it's like horses for courses sort of situation. I think he's a player that does excel in certain types of matches. It's just playing him in those right matches. There's not every player is going to be world class. Not every player is going to stand out above everybody else. And McTominay falls under that category. He plays good in the team against the team that is sort of more open. He's not got that killer instinct ability to, find the killer ball, to find, afraid that they have a needle. He's not that type of midfielder. But if a game's open and he has room to pass the ball about and there is spaces and he can play the ball into it, that's a game he suits. He's able to do that. He can do the easy things well, in my eyes, and that's a productive thing to have in the team. To have a player like that who can do that it's always worthwhile. Not like I said, not every player is going to be world class. You need a squad of players as well. And McTominay for me falls in that category of a player that you need in your team for certain occasions. And I think in a way, it's not too dissimilar to a former Scot that used to play in midfield as well, and that was Darren Fletcher. He suited certain types of games, and Ferguson worked out what games Fletcher suited, and he always played in them, and that was it. And whereas McTominay is continually playing, but he's continually playing because he's needed. United have a void there, and McTominay has to fill it. There's no one else there to do it. There's no one else even coming close to him to be able to do it. Now, his form could dip in certain games, but that's not really for fault of his own. It's for fault of the fact that the opposition, he's not good enough to play against that sort of opposition. That'll suit that style. So it's hard for him, but he's only going to improve. Again, he's another player. He's not the oldest. He can always keep improving, keep getting better. And under Ralph Rangnick, he will. He'll learn to move the ball quicker, and he's already a pretty good tackler at times. He can throw the odd hard tackle about, but he is pretty good at those basics and chasing and hunting down and things like that. He can do that side of it. Under Rangnick, it'll just improve even more. So you could see him develop as a midfielder under Rangnick. He could change, and the type of midfielder we're seeing at the minute may not be the one that he'll be by the end of the season. Even there could be that much of an evolution in his game. And it's there. Like, the ability is there in my eyes. The potential is there. So it's just about Rangnick finding out the right mode for him to play in and the right teams and things and the formation. And like I said, it's horses for courses with me. And Fletcher under Fergie just springs to mind.
Yeah, he certainly got the endeavour, and he's got the shooting ability. You can tell that he was a striker in his youth days. Yeah, I think him and Fred are both kind of 7 out of 10s at best. But United really need someone with guile in the centre of the park who can break down kind of 10-man defences, and they probably need more of a number 6 specialist. So with Pogba likely leaving the club and Matic will probably be leaving as well, United will have space there to bring in those types of midfielders, and that's definitely what they need to do. Obviously, Declan Rice has been strongly linked for a long time. That will obviously cost a lot of money. But in January, Dennis Zakaria has been strongly linked with a £6 million move to United. Now, he's obviously been a really good player for Borussia Mönchengladbach. He is an out-and-out number 6, and United really need someone like that. And at £6 million, that's very low risk. if it doesn't work out, United could probably still make a profit on him. So I see it as definitely a risk worth taking.
Yeah, someone like I said, there is something missing in the midfield, and the likes of McTominay is having to try and fill that, which is asking him to put him beyond his means, sort of thing. So when you're linked with someone like Danik Zakaria, and you can see the ability in him, the type of player that he is, and all the amount that you're going to have to bring him in for, it's a no-brainer. It really, really is. If there's no one else really there for competition-wise to sign him, he should become a United player. He really should. And I'd be very disappointed as a United fan if United weren't to sign him. It's a player that ultimately you need. It's a player that's available and at a very reasonable price, and United should make the move for him. And I suppose another sort of slightly more controversial signing. I don't know if he would do it, but he's not the most settled in the world. But Gini Wijnaldum at Paris Saint-Germain, now he could certainly fill in a space there in that United midfield. Now I'm not going to say that he would even consider the move or anything like that. He may not, because of whatever allegiances he may have previously had with Liverpool. But that could be one that would be well worth at least even a fax over or a phone call to try and find out about the interest or availability, because he looks like a player that could also potentially be on the move in the summer.
Well, we'll have to wait and see. Sometimes United don't like to go after former Liverpool players because they're fearful of the reaction from the fans, and sometimes the player himself might feel loyalty to a former club. So it's a complicated one. So just coming on to board decisions in general, Richard Arnold is obviously taken over from Ed Woodward at the start of next month officially, and it's the media have been running stories for the last week that Arnold wants to run the club differently. It's been coming from the likes of the Telegraph, the Athletic, and also Mike Keegan now in the Daily Mail. It said Richard Arnold wants to leave the football decisions to United's football department, who will still report to him as he tries to turn things around. The Athletic were saying stuff like he wants to learn from Ed Woodward's mistakes. That obviously would be great as long as it actually happens and this isn't just PR spin.
Yeah, part of me just thinks that it is a PR thing. It's trying to win the fans over. Everyone knows that there's no United fan out there that's a fan of Ed Woodward, and how he operated things. So to have a like for like basically take over from him, which is exactly what Arnold is. They even, I think, the old university buddies and everything. And they are very, very similar. They're of the same ilk. So. But then at the same time, he could have sat back and seen what has gone on under Woodward and realised that there's no point in me making the same mistakes that he has made. He could have learned from those mistakes, which I'm sure as a United fan you would hope. But it's hard to know. Until he hits the ground, it's anyone's guess. If he's any sensibility about him, which I'm sure he should have, and I say it as from learning from Woodward's mistakes, he should take a standoffish approach, obviously cover the overall yeses and nos at the end of the day, but let the football side of things be done by the football people. They know best. They know how to run it. That way, they live or die by their own sword. There's managers previously that maybe haven't been able to have the say or the influence that they maybe wanted to, and we're still talking about high-profile managers. Because Woodward was so in control and so hands-on. So at least this way, I know his first massive job is obviously going to be the future appointment. He's going to have a lot of input in, I'm sure. The manager coming in, but if it's his choice, he brings it in and agrees to it, and then lets that manager sort of run the squad how he wants, pick the players that he wants as long as he knows the budget. The manager lives and dies by their own sword then, and you can't really blame or put too much blame on Arnold. So if he's any sensibility, like I said, he will do that approach, but I'm still not completely convinced. I still think he could be a bit of a Ed Woodward lookalike.
What gives me hope in all this is that Woodward seen himself as a footy fan. That's why United continue going after Galacticos, like Ronaldo, Varane, Sanchez, and ones that we didn't get like Bale and Fabregas and Mbappe and players like that. Whereas Richard Arnold, I understand, is a rugby union fan, doesn't even like football that much, so maybe he won't even want to get involved. And so couple that with the fact that Woodward made a lot of mistakes, he might think it is a sensible approach, to leave the full decisions up to whoever the manager is. Ralph Ranick, when he's still there in his consultancy role, and John Murto and Don Fletcher, and that probably, because you can't just keep trying the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So we'll just have to wait and see on that one. I think we'll find out over the course of the summer transfer window whether it's really happening or not. Another thing I want to talk about is the new manager coming in the summer. I know I'm very reluctant to blame Ralph Ranick for what's going on right now, because he's only get in through the door. But we know that you become guilty by association, and based on what we're seeing so far, he will not be getting a job on a permanent basis. And if it continues like this, there is obviously going to be a new guy coming in, and obviously Eric Ten Hag is the fans' favorite. Also, Pochettino has been strongly linked. Berber Mancini has even been linked. That would be a controversial one. But in my opinion, whoever comes in, there needs to be a complete culture change at the club. Players with the right ability have to come in, but also the right mentality. We need a complete clear out. This talk of 11 players want out and 17 players are unhappy. Let them all go. Don't let the door hit them on the way out, because there needs to be a complete culture change. Arnold, handing decisions over to the football department, that's a good starting place. And after that, we need to start weeding out all the players, all the overpaid prima donnas now, who constantly leaking information out to the press. Players who want to leave, their contracts are running down, and players are unhappy they're not playing. Just let them all go, and let's start again.
Yeah, no, you couldn't have put it better, really. There is massive change that is needed. United were sort of gradually over the last few seasons, we're starting to build up what you would have thought would have been a half decent squad, at least a decent starting 11. But there's always just been key positions that's been missed out, and there's certain players who think they're better than what they are, and they're worth more than what they're worth. And there's certainly a few who maybe think they're bigger than the club, and they deserve to get their own way, and that's that. These are similar players. These players have cost a few managers the job, in all honesty. So there is a massive change needed. I think there is a culture problem in the club with the players at the minute. I think there probably is quite a few cliques. There's quite a few bit of tit for tat going on, and who thinks they're better than who, or who thinks who's not trying, or who's not doing this. And unfortunately, it comes whenever you offer about the huge contracts that Man United have offered to certain players who really aren't worth it. They start to believe they're as good as what they are, or what they think they are. So there's a lot of players that could be moved on, but as you said, the right players need brought in. It doesn't necessarily mean that you need to go and spend 100 million on a player. That is not always the case. It's just about you're having the right scouting system in place and finding the right players. The perfect example out there is the money that was wasted, and in my opinion, wasted on Harry Maguire. For him to be the world's most expensive centre back, the world's most expensive defender, that is ludicrous, absolute madness. And that no doubt went to his head. It did. It went to his head, and he believed the hype, when really he's a bang average defender, and that's just honest. He really is. He can head a ball, and that's about it. When he gets the ball at his feet, he thinks he's Paolo Maldini walking forward when he's really not. So there is players that need cleared out now. It's going to be tough to move some of the players along if they're still tied into contracts, because you're going to have to try and find buyers, and there will be certain players that there won't be too many takers for. But the likes of Pogba, his contract's running out. Take the loss, just let him go. I certainly wouldn't be trying to offer him a contract just to be able to sell him on. I would just be pushing him out the door, letting him go. And anyone else who doesn't want to be there, Anthony Martial made it quite clear he wanted to move on. Let him go. Just let him move on. Whoever he can agree terms with, let him go. I wouldn't even worry right now about trying to break even, or not make as bad a loss, or this, that, and the other. If there's players that simply do not want to be there, you have to let them go, because it's only going to make the atmosphere worse at the club. And it's clearly bad enough at the minute. So to keep players there who don't want to be there, it's just going to worsen and worsen. Um, and the new manager will have a big job. He will have to be offered a lot of control. So hopefully Arnold does stand back and lets the new manager pick and choose basically who he believes in, who he thinks will be part of his squad for the future. Because there'll be a lot of players already. Any prospective manager that's looking will be straight away picking out players that they do not want in that squad, and it's very easy to almost pick a few out. So whether it be if it is Potch or anyone else, it'll just be intriguing to see how they handle it.
Well, I don't think any United fan's going to disagree with you when you say that Harry Maguire is not worth £80 million. You struggle to find a United fan right now who rates Harry Maguire at all. And that was part of the disastrous cultural reboot between Solskjaer and Ed Woodward. That policy just failed like every other one in the last 8.5 years. United really need to move on from that, and hopefully they have, because buying in all this British talent and thinking that was going to change the mentality. If anything, the mentality inside the dressing room has went backwards. Yeah, we really need to bring in players. Really need to be they need to be kind of scanned to make sure that they have the right mentality coming to the club. That's what it's all about. You don't just bring in players with the ability. They need to have have it upstairs as well. And I know that's what other successful clubs have been doing. They go after players who are driven and hungry. They don't. The United probably have signed far too many Galacticos, and they don't all fit into the same team, and they all wanna score goals. And a prime example of that is when Greenwood and Ronaldo not passing the ball to each other. It's just too much of that. And Ronaldo has been doing an interview with Sky Sports just last night, and some very interesting quotes in there. One of the pickouts is when he said, at 18, some players spoke to me. I took that as having to improve because they knew more than me. This new generation don't accept criticism. If you don't want my help and advice, do your job, look at yourself, do your best to help the team. Now that seems to be a bit of a dig at some of his younger teammates who have obviously refused to take his advice, and that kind of shows the arrogance of some of the young players who've been given too much money too soon, driving all their supercars, thinking that they've made it just by being a United first teamer. Well, actually, you haven't made it. You don't make it until you've actually won trophies, and it just seems to be United have got all the wrong mentalities there. Obviously the likes of Ronaldo, Cavani, and Varane are excluded from that, but there's a lot of players in the dressing room who have won nothing, but they think that they're superstars. And the fact, back in September, all I heard was coming from the United dressing room on social media was that they were so happy to be playing with the goat. The goat's coming home, and we're so excited to be playing with him. Now he's just another old guy who's trying to tell them what to do, and they don't want to listen to him.
Yeah, and it's a difference in generation. It really, really is. You would have thought of it. It comes down to the type of person, the type of player that it is at a young age now. And as you say, United, unfortunately, a couple of the youngsters that have sort of broke through into the starting 11 or else the first team squad all seem to have pretty poor mentalities when it comes to that type of thing. They certainly don't seem open to too much criticism. If they get criticisms, they seem to take it thick. They seem to take it as they're having a go at them. It's not constructive, whereas it's the complete opposite. And that is a problem slightly with today's generation. I'm not going to sound like an old person, but the new sort of generation of teenagers and breaking into their 20s almost, these type of guys these days think the world owes them everything, that everyone should buy to them, and that's it. But that's the problem. You have a player like Ronaldo, so much experience. He's been there, he's done it, he's won it all. If he's giving you advice, you should listen, or at least have the respect to stand there. You don't maybe not want to take it on board, but at least stand there and listen to him. You don't just flatly reject it, or else take it as if he's having a go at you, or take it sick, and getting a huff, or throw a tantrum. which clearly seems to be the case with certain players. Anything you can learn from Cristiano Ronaldo is worth learning. There's a reason that the guy has the physique he even still does now. If he can help you in something as little as your training regime, or what you do after training, or in your lifestyle, take that on board. If you don't want to listen to him about what to do on the pitch because you think you're better than him, or you think you're this, you think you're that, don't. But at least listen to him in some aspects of life, because there's a lot to learn from Cristiano. There obviously is. There's a reason he's playing Premier League football still, or Champions League football, at his age, and that he's still leading the line for Portugal, and looking to go to the next World Cup with Portugal. It's because he's so driven and he's so hungry, even his age. If the young players could learn half of that from him, then United would have a hell of a team. But the problem is that they don't. And the problem is that they don't want to, which is really, really unfortunate. And I think Ronaldo has realised that since joining there. And I think it might be more so of an English thing, because I doubt he even would have had this problem with Juve. I'd say a lot of young Italians or other foreign players that may have come through Juventus, I think would have loved to have learned from Cristiano, and I'm sure some of them did. I'm sure Dybala sat and listened to every word that Cristiano would have said. Even Murata, when Murata was there, I think Murata probably would have something just stunned him in awe, thinking, "Yep, I listen to you everything because you know how to finish, and I don't." So it's disrespect in so many levels, but it is today's young generation, unfortunately, and Ronaldo has got a real culture shock by coming back to United and realising that.
It's pretty scary that if a lot of those young players, Ronaldo was bound to have been one of their childhood heroes, particularly if they've come to the United Academy. And if he's come back to United after 12 years and he's given those players advice and you don't want to hear it, that's scary arrogance there. Like that, if your boyhood hero is trying to give you advice, a man who's still playing at 36 and has won it all, and you think you're too good for that, that's extremely alarming that someone could be that arrogant at just 20, 21. There's I just want to come on to a point that we talked about earlier. You were saying about Alexa Martial and Pogba leaving the club. No doubt they will, but that's another thing that has to change in terms of the culture of the club. The board overruling the manager. Now, Mourinho wanted to get rid of these two players in 2018, and he wasn't allowed to do that, and also wasn't given the centre back that he wanted, and obviously that eventually led to his departure 6 months later. Now, hopefully in the future, when the manager says we have to let this player go, that they won't be overruled by the Richard Arnold like the way Ed Woodward did, because of his commercial value to the club and all this sort of nonsense. That undermines the manager. It gives rise to player power, and that's why we're in the situation that we're in. And I also think there's a real opportunity for a clear out this summer, because there's so many players out of contract, not just Pogba, Lingard, Cavani, sadly, as well. And there's players who are not playing who will definitely want to move on. Bailly, Henderson, Lingard, obviously you touched on already. There's a few others. Van der Beek, probably as well, but that could change if Erik ten Hag is the new coach. That could completely turn his United career around. But yeah, there is a lot of players who are not playing, want to move on, and players are out of contract. So it's a real chance to kind of clear the decks a wee bit and start again. With regards to Maguire, it's going to be really hard to shift a player who cost 80 million just 3 years ago, who's now, he must be nearly 29 now. So United are never going to get that money back. They're just going to have to accept the loss. But then another issue is that United keep giving crazy contracts out to players. That's why Phil Jones has been so hard to shift, because he's never going to get that money at the clubs that are willing to buy him. So that's why United are constantly having to loan out players, and then they come back again, and then they have this really bloated squad. I think United currently have 29 players on the books. It's absolutely crazy. So there's so much work to be done between the football department and the board in the next few seasons.
No, there is. Look, it's no easy task. Any prospective manager who may be interested in the job, and of course there will be lots of people interested in the job because it's a Man United job. But they've got to really realise the scale of the project that lies in front of them. There is a lot of work that needs done. There's a lot of ins and outs that need done, and if you're the new guy coming in, you've got to have a clear plan and clear vision for what you want for the squad, because it is like starting from a blank space. You really do need that. I think the other side of it is obviously that to move the players on can prove it could prove tricky. The likes of Harry Maguire, he may eventually end up having to be, as bad as it sounds, for a player who costs what he costs, loaned out just to get his wage bill at least off. But nobody's going to pay his full wages. That's just not going to happen. So it's a loss there in that respect as well. And the unfortunate thing is say United stupidly give so many players bumper contracts. And the one that really screams out and jumps out is Henderson's contract. De Gea and Henderson, it's good to have two competitive goalkeepers. But if you have two goalkeepers that are almost paid similar sort of money, are at the higher end of the spectrum of your wage bill, that can't be justified. You have one number one. You make your choice. You choose who your number one is. You cannot have two goalkeepers at a club who should be starting for a club, and they're both fighting it out on the same wages, and you only pick one guy. I mean, how many appearances has Henderson made since he signed this bumper contract? Really, it's embarrassing. If you worked out what he was paid per minute that he's played, like, that would be crazy. And I think, but also Henderson would be annoyed himself. I think he was maybe almost made a false promise in respect of maybe being the number one goalkeeper, but David De Gea refound his form, and it went up shit creek, so to speak. So it's a tough situation for United. And as I said, they need to be able to take losses. They need to be able to be just open to the idea of letting players move on for little or nothing. I know it's a business at the end of the day, but if you want to improve and you want to keep, getting a better team and actually challenging for things to make more money, to make more revenue, and to win trophies, there needs to be a lot of change. A lot of players need to leave, and then that means players coming in. So there is a big job, and there is managers out there who's going to be more than capable of it, and it will happen. But it's down to the board. It's down to Arnold all being open to this change. And change is scary for a lot of owners and boards and things like that. But the Glazers, for one, finally have to, if they really want to improve the squad, which I suppose that's still up for debate whether they really genuinely care that much about it or not. But change needs to happen.
Yeah, and for example, if Newcastle or Aston Villa or someone's willing to offer 25, 30 million for Harry Maguire, United have to take it because no one else is going to come along with a higher offer. So let's say hi to Dallas United, who's joining us, and she says hi, Kyle Doogie. Okay, let's come on to the league game against Villa, which we briefly touched on earlier. Now, Aston Villa have not beaten United at home in the league since the famous Alan Hansen game of 1995, where he said, you can't win anything with kids. And that's like a generation ago. That's 26 and a half years. Now, Aston Villa, at no other point in the last 26 and a half years will they have felt more confident of beating United at Villa Park in a league game. This seems to be the chance. United are all over the place at the moment. It's a fractured dressing room. Aston Villa are still on a bit of a high from Jared's arrival. They've just brought in Coutinho, Lucas Digne from Everton. There seem to be a club on the rise, and they've had a really good performance at Old Trafford. Okay, didn't come away with the result, but they'll feel confident now of turning this United team over at Villa Park, especially as United struggled away to Norwich and Newcastle recently. So if you're a betting man, you would get Aston Villa into your docket, I'm afraid.
Yeah, look, what you touched on there, Aston Villa still being on a high from Jaguar. They are, of course, their form has been better than decent. It really, really has. Their only real losses, I think, off the top of my head, I think were to Man City and Liverpool. So there's no shame in that. And Jaguars certainly won't be disappointed by that run of form. Those are two matches that you sort of is going to be very, very difficult to get anything from. So then you took the other spin of it, and you look at them come up to play against Man United. It's a United team that Ralph Rangnick has sort of, you can say he steadied the boat sort of slightly. I think it's 4 wins from 7, but it's not great. The performances aren't great. The defense looks a bit steadier and doesn't look like they'll leak goals, but it still looks unbalanced. It's not a great performance each game. And you've got an Aston Villa team that's going to start like a whirlwind. If Coutinho plays, that's a whole other dimension United's going to have to deal with. I think people may have forgotten how good Coutinho can be on his day. And I think on the Jaguar, Aston Villa could be getting a very, very good player with Coutinho. And I think his link-up play with the likes of Buendia, Watkins and Ings could be very, very good. It's very intriguing and interesting to see how it develops. But if I was an Aston Villa fan, I'd be very confident going into this weekend, especially after the FA Cup tie, and seeing how well Villa did play at Old Trafford in stages. So at home, in front of their own fans, it's hard to see anything else than a Villa win at the minute.
Well, with regards to United's formation, so far, in terms of the way they've started games anyway, Ralph has used the 4-2-2 formation, but he's changed the formation 4 times in the last 2 games. So might he start with a different one this time? Might he go with a more diamond formation, which he finished the Aston Villa game with when he brought Donny van der Beek on for Cavani? United in the last 20 minutes of that game seemed a bit more secure. They weren't giving up as many chances to Aston Villa. So might he think of starting the game with a diamond on Saturday?
It would not surprise me. I think that it's definitely a game that United, I don't think, are going to approach in an open sort of mood, an open formation. I think it would be silly too, because I think Aston Villa would play it more so into Aston Villa's hands than United's. I think they'll try and keep it a very, very tight game. And having the diamond in midfield might work best for them. And out of the diamonds, it could be very defensive in midfield. It really, really could. And that could be just to stop. Also, if they see Coutinho on the starting lineup, or if there's knowledge that he's going to be starting, there could be a man, not going to say a man marker to follow him about, but someone very, very close back in hand just to try and stop him from creating anything. And look, you're coming up against a quite difficult midfield as well. John McGinn is a very highly rated player. He's very, very good. He's definitely only one step away from potentially joining what you would call a top 4 team. He definitely is. He's almost good enough for that in my eyes. And then Douglas Luiz, I think he's a very solid midfielder, very hard to play against, and can create quite a few good opportunities for players as well. And then if you throw Coutinho into that mix as well, and then the young lad Ramsey, who was playing, he's just broke through really. He looks a talent too. So it's going to be tough. I think United will probably operate the diamonds, or if not that, it'll definitely be 2 holding midfielders with 2 quite close to them playing in midfield as well. They won't be out wide. There won't be no wingers, so to speak, rather than possibly trying to help up front. But the wing backs may be an option. They could even potentially move to 3 at back, or to potentially the 5. Whatever way you want to look at it with the wing backs, because Villa are going to attack. Villa are going to try and overrun Man United, and that's what Rangnick is. He's sensible. He's a smart manager. He'll know how to counteract that, and we may not see a whole bunch of the gegenpressing, because it may not be that type of game where it'll be that useful. So it'll be a defensive approach from United, in my view, and they'll try and maybe catch on the counter, but I think Villa will have enough for that and will probably be able to deal with that.
Yeah, I think the problem with the 4-2-2 formation is that Rangnick tends to use 2 holding midfielders, and then in front of him, essentially 4 forwards, and they're not tracking back, and United are getting overrun in midfield. and it's been happening in the Wolves game, Newcastle, Norwich, many games. So this is a game where we could, if we use that formation and play four forwards, we're going to get, we could be 3-0 down inside 20 minutes. So it does seem like a good idea to pack the midfield in a game like this, and I wouldn't be surprised to see it. He is an intelligent coach, so I would expect a change in formation here and a slight change in personnel, because United cannot afford to allow Aston Villa to outnumber them in the centre of the park.
No, no, definitely not. And that's why, as I say, the more defensive approach in the midfield would be more the view I think Ranić would take. I think he would have learned a lot from the FA Cup tie. There's no better way to prepare for a match than having played that same team literally within the last 7 days. You know how they're going to play, you know how they're going to act, and so he can definitely prepare for that. And it's going to be that tenfold because it's going to be at Villa Park. It's going to be at their own home ground. So he is smart enough to learn from that, and I think he will. But I still think that Villa's performance might just be that bit too much for the team to deal with.
So what is your prediction then?
I would predict 2-1 Aston Villa win, but I think the scoreline may not reflect the overall game. I think Aston Villa might dominate large periods of the game, but United will always be in the game with the odd counter attack, and I think it looked like a very comfortable overall game for Villa, but it'll be one that they'll just edge on the scoreline.
Yeah, well, I'm going to try and be a bit more positive. What I'm going to say is Villa will dominate the first half, will not score as many goals as they should. Then United will bring Cavani off the bench. He'll score, or Ronaldo will score a penalty, and United will escape with either a draw or a win.
That's quite easily be the same way as what my sort of prediction went, just the scoreline slightly different.
Yes, either of those scenarios wouldn't really surprise me. So it's been a pleasure to have you on the Glory Glory podcast. I regularly do Ultimate Football and Ultimate Boxing with you, so it's good to have you on the show.
Yeah, no, it's great to be invited on and to speak about one topic in particular and not just broad-minded over the whole of football or boxing.
Yeah, because you can't really cover Man United in a kind of a football show where you're talking about 20 teams, because with Man United every single week there is 20 different topics. It's just crazy. It's chaos at United always. So I'll see you back on Ultimate Football, and I'm sure I'll have you back on this channel at some point as well.
No worries.